Hi guys, it's Beth again here, and I'm an admin over at Aurora Designs, and I decided to use some of my strike scraps to make a hat for my daughter. She really likes Harry Potter and she really likes Gryffindor, so I'm going to use this cute little doll size that we offer panel, and I'm going to use some scraps I have on hand, and I'm going to create the front of her hat. Now the hat I have on, I actually used, I think it was a child size panel. It was a little off. These are flawed panels, so there's some, slightly things off with them. And this one, the size of the white around it was off. So I'm thinking it was supposed to be child size, but I used that for the top of my hat and it turned out super cute. But I kind of wanted to do something fun and different with hers. So I'm taking my doll panel and I'm using the Patterns for Pirates Slouchy Beanie pattern, and I'm not going to show that off right now, but you can get it free actually over on their website, so check that out, and also check out some of their other patterns while you're there. They have amazing patterns. I use the Layer Me Up shirt and the Slim Fit raglan and the Essential Tank. Those are the three off the top of my head that I can think of that I use constantly, and then I've sewn so many of their patterns, and they're fun and just easy sews. So check out their other patterns while you're there. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I had started this and then I thought, oh, you guys might like to see what I'm going to do. So what I decided to do is I took my pattern piece and I folded a piece of wrapping paper in half, and then I cut it out, and so that way when I open it up I have the entire front panel piece right there, so I can start planning out how I'm going to color block this onto this. So there's always different ways you can do things. You can make it as simple or hard as you want to. I decided I wanted diagonal lines because I feel like they're kind of in right now and they're just super cute and fun. So I kind of put my pattern about where I felt like I wanted the center of my graphic. And so I kind of have it sitting right in there, okay? And what I've done is I have drawn a line going across here, and I know I want this top part to be gold. Now I'm not drawing on my graphic piece. You can do that, but I have to take into account seam allowances and stuff like that, and I did not want to risk having a bunch of lines where I didn't want them yet. So I just left it like that. So I'm actually just going to put, because I know I'm not going to use these, I'm going to put two little dots right here to show me that I need to line this up with the dots each time I take it off, so that I kind of have my graphic where I want it to be, and that way I can make it look cute and work for me. So the next thing I want to do is, I really like the idea of having that diagonal right there, and so then I kind of fight with myself. Do I want like a triangle type banner, or do I want it to be another straight graphic? And I know I'm going to have my band be red, the back's going to be gold, and I want gold at the top, so that when they connect at the top, I'm connecting the gold to the gold. So my next question would be, how do I want to break up the next section? So I could come in here like this, and that would be super fun, and it wouldn't be too difficult, except this triangle right here could give me maybe some problems. It shouldn't be too bad. And it would be super cute, and so that would give me kind of a fun diagonal shape. Or I could come in here like this, have a little bit more of the white showing this way, and have another fun line, kind of even that out a little bit, bring that to that point. This is going to come to this point, cut that, and then I just have to worry about these two side pieces right here. So I think I'm going to do that. I kind of like that idea of the diagonal. I think if I was doing it, maybe, I don't know, I might consider doing the red going around like that. I think that's kind of cool too. But I kind of like the idea of just the straight diagonal shape. Decisions. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to lay this out where I want it, how I want this diagonal shape to go. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to mess with that graphic at all, so I'm going to pay attention to that when I'm laying this out. So I'm going to lay this out kind of like this. So this part right here is going to be red going around here, and then this part right here is going to be gold, and then I'll have a red strip going around the bottom, and I will have to have this kind of color blocked in here somehow too. So I have to decide kind of how I want to do that. So I'm going to put my lines here. I don't know, that triangle's looking more and more tempting. You see what I deal with? Maybe I need to make 2 color block tacks. All right, I'm going to move my panel out of the way so I can put my line in. And then I'm going to line my panel back up so I can figure out how I want to do the rest. Now this in itself would be a super cute if I was just doing even the back. Just a super fun, cute way to do things. But I want this panel piece in here. That's why I started this. So let's figure out where I need to put these lines so that I like the look of it and it's still a fun and different piece. And I don't want to cut into my graphic. So I had my graphic kind of laid out there, and I'm going to pull this down, but I might have to change that now that I'm looking at it, because what's going to happen is this line is actually going to cut right along the bottom side, and then when you put seam allowance in, I'm going to lose part of my graphic. So I'm going to pull my graphic up, and this is why I don't put lines on it, because I would have had a big old gold line going right across there. So I'm going to pull my graphic up, and I still have plenty of space, and so now I need to put extra dots, lower dots. So I'm going to put a dot here because I know that's my lowest, and that's my dot right there. And I think what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to keep these kind of simple, and I'm going to go from the top of the graphic down. I just have to decide how big of a white piece I want in there. And I kind of want to do it, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this upper point on the pattern so that I kind of keep the width kind of even. So I'm looking at the graphic, and the graphic comes off. So I'm going to use the upper point, and I'm going to go about 1/2 inch off the graphic on each side of that point. And that should put me right about here, and it really doesn't take, there's a couple little green spots it's going to take off, you'll see, but it's not going to take off a whole lot. So, and I know that this is going to hit some seam allowance, so I don't mind doing this a little bit, although I'm going to try and not hit the fabric as I do this, at least not up high, just in case I change my mind about placement. And then I can just move this fabric out of the way in a minute here and finish those lines off. So again, I'm going to come up here, I'm going to get my ruler kind of straight here. I don't have my pattern piece that straight, so I'm kind of eyeballing things a little bit. Nothing ever has to be super exact, but I do want it to look good. And if I come off 1/2 inch, again, I'm getting a few of the green speckles are going to be cut out of this, but for the most part, with my seam allowance, especially if I go with a smaller seam allowance, I will be okay. I almost should have gone 3/4 of an inch out looking at this on this side. But I think we're going to make this work just fine, because when I put my seam allowance in there, it's going to be cutting it kind of close, but I really think that that really will just highlight the Harry Potter. So we're going to come in, we're going to go there, and we're going to kind of line this up, trying to get it nice and even all the way down on my lines here, on my grid line. There we go. There we are, and I'm going to just bring this up, and then what I'm going to do... Okay, baby, just 1 minute. I'm going to come in. Sorry, life with kids. My little cutie patootie here. Oh, no.
Mom, give me chocolate milk.
I'm almost done with showing him how I'm going to do this part, and then I'll pause it and get you some chocolate milk. Can you say hi? Hi. Hi. Oh, look at you, you little ham. All right. You can go ask sister to get you some chocolate milk otherwise.
I think.
Yeah, you are big. Look at you. Careful, you're going to fall and bust something.
Oh.
I know. Don't do it. Don't do it. All right. So, whoa, sir, come here. Come here.
Yes.
You're supposed to be laying down. Come here. All right. So, here's what we're going to do next. This is Sam. He's my little monster. Okay, that's our favorite thing to do in the camera. So, here's what I did. So I took my pattern piece, I got it all laid out my panel on there, okay? And then I decided where I wanted my lines to be. So I took my ruler, and I figured out what looked aesthetically pleasing to me. I knew the scraps I'm using. I'm using all scraps from the glitter round and then this panel. So I have some left over. I made an angel top with this, and it was super cute. It's cotton lycra. And then I have this wonderful French terry. It's orange from our glitter round. So this is going to be the back and then portions of the hat. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I went ahead and I figured out where I wanted my lines to be. So I watched where my graphic was laid, kind of laid my ruler out going halfway down, used the top center points to mark a ½ inch over from them so I could keep that center line fairly even. That way it didn't look too wonky. If you don't want to do that, then I would recommend going way wonky. Because if things look like they're supposed to be, they're not going to be slightly off, they're going to be really off. So anytime you're doing any color blocking, if you don't want things to be exact, take it really off a little bit, and it's going to make it actually look better than if you just go slightly off. Like if I would have done a ½ inch on this side and then maybe 3/4 of an inch on this side, it might have looked like I didn't intend that to happen, that I just really didn't think that through. So if you're going to be off on your color blocking, make it count and make it seem, purposeful, and then that way your piece turns out right. So that's what I did. I laid that out. So then I drew my sidelines. I have diagonal lines going this way. Diagonals are really in right now, and so I drew all those lines in. And then what I did is I took a pink highlighter. So I used the gold to draw the lines in initially. Those are the lines I'm going to be cutting on. But what I did is I went on the sides of all of my things with the pink highlighter. And the reason I did this is I did it all but on the areas where I don't need color blocking. See? Or where I don't need seam allowance. So that I knew when I was cutting these pieces out that I was only cutting seam allowance where it was necessary. And that's going to be key, guys. You don't want to put seam allowance here. It's not going to line up right. It's going to make you really difficult trying to figure out what you did wrong. So be organized and purposeful when you're color blocking, and it makes it go a whole lot faster and easier. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you cutting this out and getting the other parts ready. Now, while it's laid out, sometimes it's easier to just put on your pattern what colors you want where. You can always change this later, but that way you have that idea when you're going to cut those pieces out, especially if you're using a lot of colors. So I know I want this entire top section to be gold. So I'm just going to put G's all the way across. And this is my panel, so it's going to be a P. And then I'm going to go, I want the red color here and here. And I'm going to do the G, gold color, on those spots. Now if I run out of room on my fabric, I can change those if I want and still make them look cute. But this is my plan for now, and it should work just fine. I know about how much fabric I have left to mess with, so that's going to help. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this pattern out. And I'm going to actually use my ruler, and I have a rotary cutter. Now this rotary cutter, I use this rotary cutter for paper, so don't get all worried. I know it's going to dull my blade, but I use it to cut out all my patterns. I feel like it's a whole lot easier to just, I'm used to a rotary cutter, that's what I want to use. I don't want to do a bunch of scissor snips. So for me, that's what I use. Every once in a while I'll pull the scissors out when necessary, not too often. So I know my line's right here. And what I need to do is I need to add my seam allowance in when I cut these out, but I'm not going to add them in until I cut on the fabric. You'll see that in a minute. And the reason for that is because I didn't draw them in on my pattern piece. I didn't want to have to change my whole pattern piece out. So I'm going to add my seam allowance to my fabric when I cut it out, but not when I'm just cutting out the pattern itself into pieces. So I'm just going to throw this down right onto the gold line. I'm going to bring this up to the gold line here, and I'm going to bring this down and have it all situated there. And I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to cut right here. Now what I'm going to do is, the nice thing is my pattern already has a fold for me folding it in half before. So I know kind of about where my center line is, and that's what I'm going to be looking at when I do the panel. And I really want to show you that first. I want to show you how I'm going to cut this panel. So here's my panel, And I'm gonna take this panel and I'm gonna find its center that I want, the center line I want to use. And I'm gonna line that center line up with the fold of this center line, okay? So I'm gonna look on here and I'm just gonna move this. I'm using my cutting mat. I have a 19 down here and I'm gonna use that 19 to find my center line of where I want it and the ruler. So there's my 19. So I kind of want the bottom to just come over just a tad and this to come up just a little bit. Okay. And now I've got it lined up, 19 above here, 19 down here. This is lined up in the middle where I want it. I'm gonna check here and just see and make sure that I'm not way off center here, and I'm not. It looks pretty good. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my pattern piece. This is the one, it has the P on it, and I did that so that I would know that I wanted that for the panel. And I'm going to line my pattern piece up on the 19 as well on the center line, because remember I have that fold, so I can kind of move my pattern piece around and it makes it a whole lot easier when cutting this out. And I'm looking under and it looks like my seam allowance might run into the top of my Harry Potter, so I'm going to bring this up just a little bit. And I'm doing that because I don't want that seam allowance to run. Like, this is the most important piece that I'm cutting out for my panel, because I don't want the seam allowance to hit any of the edges of the actual Harry Potter symbol. And because I'm coming down at an angle, this has to kind of be there and there. I think this will work, because I'm going to put I'm adding my seam allowance in now on top of this. So this is going to be where I want it to be. It'll be fine once I add the seam allowance to it. It looks scary right now. But I think that that's going to work good. So I have it all lined up. I have this center line going center down the panel piece for 19. I'm going to put my pattern weights on this side. Then I'm going to move my ruler that was the pattern weight on that side, and I'm going to put pattern weights over here so that when I cut this out, I cut it all out just fine. Now, I'm going to need to move these pattern weights around as I do this. So sometimes you just pull them off and on easier. Because I know I want to run. I'm going to do... So I said, what, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around this. So I'm going to bring this to the 3/8 mark, and I've got that going all the way up on my ruler. So it's just past the quarter. It's the next mark up from the quarter. And I'm going to just go, and I'm going to make sure it's all even, and I'm going to cut this line. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing here on this line. So I'm going to move this up to the 3/8, and my weight's kind of getting in the way, so I'm just going to pull those back. And I'm going to line this up right on the edge there of the 3/8 mark. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to make my cut. Okay, now you always want to make sure that you're keeping a pattern weight on here, because if I pull this off and I move it funky, it's going to stink. So I just am going to slide my pattern weights up into place, and I know I need a 3/8 of an inch mark down this way. So I'm going to come here, move my pattern weights up as I need them, get my line lined up to my 3/8, and I'm not going to cut my cord here, and I'm going to cut all the way up. There we go. All right, and so now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put these weights over here, slide this one down here so that stays where I want it. I'm going to bring this over here. I'm going to line this up with the 3/8 mark. Okay, that's all lined up with the 3/8 mark, and I'm going to bring this down and I'm going to cut it out. And you guys will be able to see my pattern all cut out, and then when I sew it together, I'm going to sew on the 3/8 mark, and so it will all come out just how I have it. So there is my panel piece all cut out now. All right, so next I'm going to cut the reds. What I try to do when I'm using scraps is I try to use the easiest part, but also the smallest part for me. So not always the smallest part. That's going to still take grain line into account. So I already can tell that this piece is kind of going up and around, and this will take it in. And honestly, when I cut this out, it's not going to roll everywhere. But one thing I should have probably done was mark up and down lines on my pieces, so I knew to follow the grain line so that you don't end up with a bunch of twists. But I can kind of eyeball it a little bit, so I'm going to do that. And it will be fine. It'll be okay. So this piece, I'm not putting seam allowance on the outer edge, right? Because I don't need it there. But I am going to put it everywhere else. So I'm going to cut all of the areas that need seam allowance before I cut that rounded edge, and I'm going to show you why. So first I'm going to kind of move my, hopefully it's going to get jiggly here for a minute. I want to show you. So this is not going to be cut until last on that edge because I do not need seam allowance there. I don't need it, so I don't want to cut it there. So I'm going to start with my bottom and my top, and the reason I'm going to do that, well actually, I guess it really doesn't matter. I'm going to start here. I lied. I'm going to start here. I'm a liar, pants on fire. I'm going to put the 3/8 of mark that I need down here. I've got it all lined up. It's going all the way up and down. I'm going to come in, and I wish I knew where the rotary cutter is because the cotton lycra is not going to cut as easy, but we're going to just add some pressure to it and make that baby work for us. All right, then I'm going to come here, and I'm going to move this piece up here so that my pattern still stays where I want it. I'm going to bring this down to, again, my 3/8 mark, because that's the seam allowance I've decided to use. Now you can use the 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you're comfortable with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, do it. That's what Patterns for Pirates uses for their stuff. So when I sew this up, I'm going to have to switch back to a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm pretty good about just paying attention to my seam allowance, but if you're very familiar with certain patterns and you just use their patterns and their seam allowance, use that seam allowance, because when you're adding things in and thinking about it, you're going to end up going to what's the most familiar with you anyway. All right, so now you'll see why I waited to cut the line that doesn't need seam allowance till the end, because I'm going to bring my blade in at a slight angle, and if I would have cut that first, it would have been cut off, and when I sewed that together, I could have very well had a little bit of a wonky line there. And I'm going to cut just right along the line there up until the point, and then I'm going to kind of taper it out a little bit so I have just a little bit of room to work with when I'm attaching that. So you can kind of see actually where my seam allowance is there. And so let me show you again before I lift it up so you can see. Oh, I have a little piece caught, but that's all right. You can still see it. So as you see here, see if you can see that, I brought these angled out a little bit. So when I connect everything, it will connect okay. Otherwise, that could have been a problem. Also, by doing that, it kind of marked my piece. You can kind of see it so that I know about where things are lining up when I pin it. It makes it easier. Just one of those things. So I already did this piece. I'm going to put it over with this piece. Just keep my pieces together. It makes it a little easier to put it together in the end. Now this piece kind of goes on the end part. And so I know that straight up and down is how I want this piece to lay with the grain line. So I'm looking, and this is cotton lycra. You can see the grain line really easily with cotton lycra. Sorry, I got to slouch down so you can see me. So that's nice. So with this piece, we are not putting seam allowance here or here. For my seam allowance, I'm going to connect this down to this point, and this part's going to be completely cut off. So actually, my point's going to come this way on this one. It's really hard to explain that, but the gold and the gold has to come in there and connect just right on there, and so I'm just making my point go that way to make it easier. And then this is going to come because that gold piece was right here. It's just this little corner, and it goes right there. Okay, and so that piece is just getting connected on there, and so I really just need the extra right there, and I just know that. And so now I'm going to come around here, and I'm going to go whoop. And I don't need to worry about any angle. See, now that's where maybe I'd use the scissors, but I'm not. I'm just going to do that. Okay. I don't need to worry about any angle with this one because it's going to come up here. But when I get up to the top here, I'm going to angle that again. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to go all the way up my piece. Okay. And then I'm going to come in here at just a slight angle. And there. There we go. And I'm going to make sure all those laces are trimmed off. So here's the next piece of red. So now I have my red pieces and my gold pieces, and I am going to be able to put all of this together with the seam allowances. I'm gonna put it back together like a puzzle piece when I'm done here. So we've cut out our red, we've cut out our panel theme, and now we are gonna cut out the gold part of our panel. So I have this piece, which is gonna be a gold piece. Now with 4-way stretch, I don't have to necessarily go, I mean, my stretch is pretty much the same both ways. So I could go opposite of the grain and still be okay because I have my stretch line. I just want to make sure I line everything up, that I'm lining this up along the grain and not getting a wonky cut that way. So that's what I'm going to do, because I really want to try and utilize as much of the scrap part of my fabric as I can. It's all scrap, but I want to try and save those bigger pieces for when I really need them. So I need to come in here and I need to make sure that I am going to be able to cut this with my seam allowance. So I'm going to grab my ruler again. Lots of ruler fun here. And I'm going to throw it on here. And then I'm going to pull this off so that my pattern piece doesn't move. I'm going to put this on my markings, which I was doing 3/8 of an inch. And I'm going to start cutting. So I've got it at the 3/8 of an inch and I'm going to cut right along here. Now remember, I am not cutting the area where I don't need seam allowance to start with. I want to cut all of the areas I need seam allowance first, and then save the ones I don't need seam allowance for last, so I can put my kind of angles in there. So I've got my seam allowance on the 2 areas I need seam allowance. This one I didn't get angled as far as I would have liked to, but it's angled, so it's fine. And this pattern piece is cut. Now we're going to move on to the next gold piece. So I have 3 gold pieces, 2 red pieces, and a panel piece that I'm cutting right now to create the front pattern section of my hat. So I'm going to grab this piece and I'm going to lay this piece out. Now, this piece this is the bottom of the hat. So this is the piece. I need this to go up and down like this on my fabric. So we're going to make sure this is nice and even. We're not going across the grain as I come up. I want this to go nice and straight, lines parallel, up and down. Throwing my weights down here to hold this in place. I'm going to cut this bottom section last, so the 2 side parts need to be cut first. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put my 3/8 down right along my pattern piece there. It should all work out fine. So there's another gold piece done. So now I have this last final lovely gold piece. Okay, so here's my next piece, and I want to try and get in this piece. And this piece needs to go, so in this way I kind of did myself a favor by doing these up and down lines with this piece, because I can see right here that I want this piece to have this up and down line right here. Now I could have cut all of these out all 4-way, but why do that? As you can see, I have it here. Why cut them all out when I can just line everything up to this as I go? So this will be the last piece I sew on when I'm doing things, and that'll keep me in line. I'll be able to puzzle piece the rest together. This will be the last piece and everything should line up on here. I can even put little marks in my seam allowance to show me where my seams need to be, which is fine. So this piece is going to be fairly simple to cut out because all we're doing is the line, and then the rest of it doesn't need seam allowance. So I don't want to have to do seam allowance on my curves. That's crazy. So there it is. So now, here comes the fun part. Now we need to start constructing this to go together. Now I just realized something. These pieces weren't cut on the fold, so it really did matter which way my fabric was facing. And I think I had the gold facing up on all but this piece. So this piece is going to be backwards, so I get to recut it. Oops! It's good though, because then it shows you that that sometimes you have to make sure you do things right. So let's make sure, just before I do that, that all of these pieces that I had going here, yep, all of them are cut with the fabric facing up. So this is where it's important for you to watch the direction of your fabric. I just threw that down there and I cut that out. I was so proud of myself, saving fabric, and now I have a reverse piece for a hat. Now I'm going to save this because I could make another one of these, and if I do, then I'll just use this piece, but I'll just make sure that when I cut all of them out, I cut all of them out with the gold facing down instead of up. So let's recut this piece. All right, Let's get this up in here. Get that running. I want those lines parallel kind of so that I can make sure the grain of my fabric's going the right direction. That is really at an angle. Straight, there we go. If you don't have your grain lines parallel, what you run into is a risk of twisting, and that's not fun. I'm gonna go ahead and cut my bottom piece now, and then I'm gonna work my way around. Okay, there's that. There we are, that's why. All right, I was way off on that. There we go. Get rid of this section here because it's just gonna pull all funky, and we'll cut the rest of the piece out. And I still have, this is considered a scrap. This would be a great piece in a scrap pack or to use for something. You could use top of a shoe, all sorts of different things with this. This is a fine piece. Probably, well, this piece is a pretty wide tail, so that would work for a headband, so I'd probably leave that tail on, but I definitely, this one's kind of funky. I would take off this like little section for sure. Maybe keep it like 2 so you still have the band there, but that's what I would do. I just try to think of if I can use it, do I keep it? And if I can't use it, I lose it. That's kind of how I think that through. So let's throw these pattern weights back down. I got my pink cut out. That was the first part. Now this piece is going to be just a little bit off right here, but it's not going to matter because it's going to be in the seam allowance. So we're going to make it work regardless. So I'm going to bring this all the way down. I'm going to go all the way around. So now what you do is you put your puzzle pieces back together to make sure that you have everything going the right way as you sew. You could have numbered your pieces to start with too, like 1, 2, 3. Then you would have known, okay, I need to connect this here and there. I wasn't that organized. Honestly, I'm not that worried about it. So I have my seam allowances here, so some of these pieces are going to seem a little bit off when you put them on. You're going to see all these little extra seam allowances. That's not a bad thing. That's fine, because then you know it's there. Okay, so I'm just going to line this all up, and then I'm going to start, I'll start piecing this together here in a few minutes. This piece is going to go here, so all I'm doing is I'm piecing my pieces back together to make sure that I can form my hat, or I will have an issue. So this piece actually goes right in here, and it's going to come in and it's going to connect right here, and this is all going to be even. I know that it doesn't seem like it's even right now, but once I put my seam allowance in here, this line will all be even, and then we can test it against the other pattern piece. I'm going to go ahead and sew all this up, and then I'll show you my product when it's done. Hi. Alright, so I got it all sewn up, and you can see I have the top part of my pattern now. This little piece down here wants to kind of roll up a little bit, but it's going to be fine. When I attach the band, that won't be an issue. So now I'm going to take the other pieces of my pattern and I'm going to start constructing my beanie. So I've got this section here, and I'm going to lay it on top, and you'll see it'll line up pretty well. Here she is, all done, all ready to be sported, super fun, kind of flirty, super cute. So when I was putting this together, there were a couple things I noticed that I could have done a little bit differently that might have made this pattern blocking a little bit easier. It still didn't hinder it at all. You can't really see it. There's a seam right here. I could have honestly just left that seam out and just cut the orange line. And I realized that like midway through, and I was like, oh, I could have done that and created less work on myself, but that's all right. It's fun, and sometimes doing some of this stuff on film, you just don't catch things you might catch other times. So anyway, I'm gonna put this on so you can see. So excuse the hair. It's totally slouchy. It's for my daughter, so she does have a little bit smaller head. So you can kind of see the seam more right there, where if I would have left that out, it wouldn't be as bad of a, visual, but honestly, it's super, super cute, and I don't think she's gonna care either way because it's stinking adorable, and she Can you guess which house she likes? All right. Anyway, till the next time. See you later, guys.